Welcome to the FAA's virtual public workshop on the draft environmental assessment for the South Central Florida Metroplex. I'm Michael O'Hara, Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region. Florida is the only state in the country with 4 major international airports: Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Orlando, and Tampa. Palm Beach and St. Pete Clearwater International are also important airports in the national airspace system. In addition, Florida has a significant number of general aviation airports. You get the picture. Florida is one of the busiest states for aviation in the United States. The South Central Florida Metroplex is the FAA's plan to modernize air traffic procedures for 21 airports in the southern half of Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology. While safe, these procedures are less precise and efficient than those based on satellite technology. The satellite-based routes proposed for the Metroplex project will enhance safety and efficiency across the region. Metroplex will benefit passengers by creating more direct routes, decrease congestion at airports and in the air, improve air traffic flows, enhancing safety and efficiency, and reduce complexity and communication for air traffic controllers and pilots, making the system safer. Before we can change procedures, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, requires us to conduct an environmental assessment to determine the potential impacts of the proposed procedures. One purpose of NEPA is to ensure that proposals, alternatives, and environmental impacts of projects are fully disclosed to the public. That's why we're here today. On May 11th, the FAA posted the Draft Environmental Assessment, or EA, for the Metroplex, and we opened a 60-day public comment period that closes on July 10th. We hope that you will consider submitting comments about the document. On this website, you can click the Comments tab, and it will show you how to submit your comments. It provides email addresses and a physical address where you can send comments after the workshop. Be sure to get your comments in before the July 10th deadline. After the comment period closes, we will review and consider all substantive comments received during the comment period as we develop the environmental determination. We expect to issue the determination by September 30th, 2020. A note about the draft EA. The FAA identified inadvertent errors related to runway designations for Orlando, Tampa, and St. Pete Clearwater International airports. We updated the document on May 13th, and it's posted at metroplexenvironmental.com. I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we start. First, if you're having technical issues, you can text us anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253 or click the Technical Support tab on this webpage. Second, the workshop will last 90 minutes. We are recording the workshop and it will be posted on this website tomorrow for you to review. You can share the link with friends and neighbors who are unable to participate today. And finally, we have experts available to answer questions about the draft EA and the proposed air traffic control procedures. FAA air traffic controllers, environmental specialists, and industry representatives will answer your questions after the presentation. As a reminder, the questions asked and answers provided here are not part of the official record for the draft EA. To comment for the official record, click on the Comments tab on this website. That will link you to the FAA's official comment page for this project. Now, Lisa Favors, an environmental specialist for the FAA's Air Traffic Organization, will brief us on the draft environmental assessment.
Thank you, Michael. I will explain the draft EA for the South Central Florida Metroplex. As mentioned earlier, we developed the document in accordance with NEPA, which requires us first to identify the purpose and need for the project. In this case, the purpose and need addresses the current inefficient arrival and departure procedures for airports in South Central Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology and are less precise and efficient than satellite procedures. We need to fix that. The draft EA identifies causes for inefficiency as lack of predictable routes or procedures to transition aircraft between airport runways and high altitude en route airspace. Complex interactions between converging routes and lack of flexibility for air traffic controllers as they transition flights between high altitude and low altitude airspace. By adopting new procedures, which the draft EA calls the proposed action, we expect reduced workload due to fewer controller-pilot communications, more efficient operations due to decreased complexity, and fewer flight segments resulting in more predictable traffic flows. A detailed explanation of the purpose and need is included in Chapter 2 of the draft EA. The draft EA analyzes potential environmental impacts from the proposed action and the no action alternative. It is important to note that we analyzed many additional procedures, but they not carried forward for detailed study in the draft EA because they did not meet the purpose and need or applicable safety standards. Under no action, procedures in place from June 2017 to May 2018 would remain except for planned modifications that are independent of the Metroplex. Our analysis determined that only the proposed action would meet the purpose and need for the project. The no action alternative would not meet the purpose and need, but it was included in the draft EA as required by Council on Environmental Quality Regulations. The alternatives are described in Chapter 3 of the draft EA. Affected environment describes the human, physical, and natural environmental conditions that the proposed action could affect. The affected environment is described in detail in Chapter 4 of the draft EA. The draft EA considers the effects on 14 environmental resource categories and their subcategories identified in FAA guidance. We evaluated the alternatives under conditions forecasted for 2021, the first year the proposed action could be implemented, and under the 2026 forecasted conditions. The evaluation considers the direct, indirect, and cumulative effects of the proposed action and no action alternatives. The draft EA determined that neither the proposed action nor the no action alternatives are likely to cause significant environmental impacts to any of the environmental resource categories. For more information, you can review Chapter 5 in the draft EA. The rest of my discussion will focus on the noise analysis since you, the public, expressed most interest in that. However, feel free to ask questions about any category during the Q&A session later in the workshop. First, I will explain how we measure noise. The FAA measures aviation noise using the day-night average sound level, DNL, metric. DNL represents noise as it occurs over a 24-hour period, with nighttime noise weighted more heavily than daytime noise. DNL is the standard noise metric used for studies of aviation noise exposure in communities. To account for differences in how people respond to noise, we use the A-weighted scale, DBA. This scale closely approximates the volume of sound as perceived by the human ear. The FAA considers aircraft noise exposure of 65 dNL in residential areas and noise increases of dNL 1.5 dB or more for noise-sensitive areas exposed to noise at or above the dNL 65 dB noise exposure level to be significant. The noise analysis demonstrates that the proposed action would not result in significant noise increases. More information about how the FAA measures noise is in Appendix E of the draft EA, and a detailed noise analysis can be found in Appendix I. Before I end, the following video will show you how to look up noise information for your address. You may search more than 122,000 grid points of noise data in the study area, presented in decibels, abbreviated as dB. The grid points are U.S. Census population points located at 1/2 nautical mile intervals across the entire study area. The map opens to the study area. In the search bar, start typing your address and similar addresses will pop up. Click on the correct address and you will see a light blue map pin. The map shows the model grid points in blue. Click on each point to see a pop-up with noise analysis results. The map shows data including DNL calculated for the alternatives and the change in noise when the proposed action is compared to the no action alternative. Now our air traffic control expert will brief you on some of the more significant procedures the Metroplex proposes for your area.
I'm an air traffic controller who works for the FAA's Miami Air Traffic Control Tower and Approach Control. In this section of the website, we will walk you through the flight procedures, poster boards for Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International Airport, and Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport. Each of these boards shows a sampling of existing flight tracks and the proposed new flight procedures for jet aircraft. Any single board will show either arrival or departure tracks and procedures. They are all overlaid on the street map of the area surrounding the airports. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north facing up. The name of the airport and the names of the flight procedures are in the box on the upper right corner. This box also shows the type of operation, either arrival or departure, and the direction of flight, which we call flow, either north, south, east, or west. Flow is related to the layout of the airport's runways, and it indicates which direction the aircraft is facing when it lands or takes off from the airport's runway. A few acronyms are used in the boards. A standard instrument departure, or SID, is a departure. A standard terminal arrival, or STAR, is an arrival. Air navigation, or RNAV, is the term for modern satellite-based navigation technology used in the proposed procedures. The spelling of each arrival or departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the SNAPR departure is pronounced snapper. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that the aircraft fly to. Just as with the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the CLPSO waypoint will be pronounced Calypso. The proposed flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. This color path shows the intended flight path in the future for most flight using the new procedures. Surrounding the path are dispersed path areas, in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly in the future and account for the possibility of different routing to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for safety. The existing flight tracks are shown on the legend by color, starting from the lowest altitudes in pink, then blue, teal, and finally the highest altitudes are in green. The flight tracks shown are a just sample of jet aircraft flights which occur from March to April 2018 during the daytime, which does not include nighttime hours between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedures. Next, we'll take a look at a few arrival and departure boards for these airports. This flight procedure board for jet aircraft at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport is for east flow departures. This is the most common direction of air traffic flow at Fort Lauderdale International. There are 9 proposed departure procedures that will be used when the airport is in an east flow, which means airplanes are taking off towards the east over water and arriving over the land from the west heading east. This is the most common direction of air traffic flow at Fort Lauderdale International Airport. In an east flow, there are 8 departures to the west, east, and north called Reggae, Snapper, Felix, Arps, Vacay, Twister, Bongos, and Glades. For airplanes with destinations to the south, there's only one departure set called Mojito. Airplanes taking off and fly east, then turn to the southeast on the Reggae or Snapper procedure. Turn to the northeast on the Felix departure, or to the north on the Arps, Vacay, Bongos, Twister, and Glades departure. Aircraft with destination to the west use the Bongos procedure. This board also shows the jet departure procedures for Miami International Airport, which turn north and fly near the Fort Lauderdale area. Aircraft from Miami using the Twister and Arps procedures will initially depart navigating along the procedure and then will be given a heading to follow, called a vector, by the air traffic controller. These are shown in a lighter shade of purple and labeled with small arrows. After departure, an air traffic controller can give a pilot a heading to follow, called a vector, that will guide them out of the Fort Lauderdale area. This flight procedure board is for jet aircraft departures of Fort Lauderdale International Airport on a west flow. There are 9 proposed departure procedures that will be used when the airport is on a west flow, which means airplanes are taking off towards the west over land and arriving over the ocean from the east heading west. This is the less common direction flow of traffic at Fort Lauderdale International Airport. There are 7 departures used for west, east, and north destination, called Reggae, Snapper, Felix, Arps, Twister, Vacay, and Bongos. For airplanes with destinations to the south, there are 2 departure procedures, called Mojito and Glade departures. Airplanes flying to the east make a turn to the north and east using the Reggae, Snapper, Felix departure procedures. Aircraft with destinations to the north use the Arps, Vacay, or Twister departure procedures. The Arps procedure is also used by Miami International Airport, which are shown on the light purple lines. West flow departures from Miami join the Arps departure procedure near Boca Raton. The Twister is also used by Miami. Aircraft from Miami merge onto the Twister departure near the South Florida Wildlife Management Area. This flight procedure board is for jet aircraft arrivals at Fort Lauderdale International Airport on an east flow. There are 4 proposed arrivals that will be used when the airport is on an east flow. There are 2 runways oriented east to west. Aircraft coming from the west, north, and northwest typically land on the north runway, which is runway 10 left. These arrivals would use the CUDA, Tiki, and OLAS procedures. Aircraft coming from the south, southeast, and east land on the south runway, which is runway 10 right, and will use the Bahia arrival. However, air traffic controllers may assign alternate runways for operational needs. This flight procedure board is for jet aircraft arrivals at Fort Lauderdale International Airport on a west flow. There are 4 proposed arrival procedures that will be used when the airport is on a west flow. Aircraft coming from the west, north, and northwest typically land on the north runway, which is runway 28 right. These arrivals will use the Cuda, Tiki, and Bahia arrivals. Aircraft coming from the south, southeast, and east land on the south runway, which is runway 28 left, and will use the OLAS arrival. This flight procedure board for Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport shows the departure and arrival procedures for east flow, which, as previously noted, is the most common direction of air traffic at Fort Lauderdale. This board shows all the arrival and departure procedures used when the airport is on an east flow. There are 9 proposed departure procedures shown in purple and 4 proposed arrival procedures shown in orange that will be used in an east flow, which is the aircraft taking off to the east over the ocean and arriving over the land. There are 2 departure procedures shown in light purple that are also used by Miami International Airport for destinations to the north and west, which are the ARPS and the Twister procedures. This flight procedure board for Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport shows the departure and arrival procedures for west flow, which is the less common direction of air traffic at this airport. This board shows all the arrival and departure procedures used when the airport is on a west flow. There are 9 proposed departure procedures shown in purple and 4 proposed arrival procedures shown in orange that will be used in west flow, which is aircraft taking off to the west over the land and arriving over the ocean. There are 2 departure procedures shown in light purple that are also used by Miami International Airport for destinations to the north and west, the ARPS and the Twister procedures.
All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the live workshop. This is the second virtual workshop for the Fort Lauderdale area, and this is our live Q&A session this afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm joined by technical experts, including Luis and Rick, air traffic controllers from the Miami Airport Traffic Control Tower and Radar Approach Control, who you just heard from, as well as Lisa Favors, FAA Environmental Specialist, who you also heard from. We have several others from the FAA here, as well as airport and airline and pilot industry representatives. Luis and Eddie are also available to help with any needed Spanish translation if that would be helpful during the Q&A. As a reminder, we're holding this workshop to answer your questions about the South Central Florida Metroplex project. We're unable to answer questions about other topics in the workshop. We'd like to ask you to submit your questions for us in the Q&A box on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube, or you can text your question to us at 949-478-0253. Again, you can text us questions at 949-478-0253. If you need technical assistance, please click on the Technical Support tab on our website. And I'll turn it over to Luis for just a moment.
Pueden someter sus preguntas en español a través de la aplicación Zoom, redes sociales como Facebook, YouTube o vía texto al número 949-478-0253. Una vez más, 949-478-0253.
Thank you, Luis. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with our first question. What is the South Central Florida Metroplex? Well, the South Central Florida Metroplex is a comprehensive proposal to improve the flow of air traffic into and out of 21 airports in Florida by making the airspace safer and more efficient. This project proposes to add new, more efficient satellite-based procedures and several conventional procedures that are based on radar and other ground-based navigational aids. The initiative will focus on 4 major international airports, including Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International, Miami International, Tampa International, Orlando International, as well as St. Pete Clearwater International, Palm Beach International, and 15 smaller reliever and satellite airports. All right, let's move on to another question. Will the new procedures increase the noise generated from
Sure. Good afternoon, Michael. The FAA analyzes um, the FAA analysis for the project determined model noise levels at more than 117,000 points across the study area. And it showed that the proposed procedure would not result in any significant or reportable noise increases under FAA criteria. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, we'll just keep moving through. For east departures, the waypoint elbow has the planes turning north right after takeoff. This will cause a lot of noise for the coastal residents in Fort Lauderdale. Why can't the planes go farther east to Marley and then turn to waypoint room? Again, I'm reading those kind of the way they come in. I hope I got the waypoints right, but let me ask for some help from Rick, air traffic.
Yeah, Michael, I'll take that question. And yeah, we have the east departure board up. It's my understanding that the headings that were initially included in the procedural design were subsequently supported by the Fort Lauderdale Airport Authority with the Fort Lauderdale Tower Metroplex team. Because the goal was to stay as close to existing flight tracks as possible. Only 2 primary eastbound tracks will be used. Now, if all aircraft were to depart to Marley, it would drastically affect the throughput of the airport. Prior to the pandemic, Fort Lauderdale Airport was one of the fastest growing airports in the country. Limiting the airport's throughput to one path would cause significant delays. Also, if aircraft with destinations to the north and to the northwest were to fly that far to the east, then those aircraft would be restricted to a lower altitude for a longer period of time than what they're flying today. And this is due to the Fort Lauderdale arrivals that come from the northeast and from the southeast. Now, the other option would be driving the arrivals to a lower altitude, but again, that could potentially cause noise issues with the arrivals. If we zoom in on the boards, you can see that the departure to the east is a RNAV departure, and the aircraft will fly out from the airport over the industrial areas and will go into the ocean before it actually makes its turn towards Elbow.
Rick, thank you. Okay, we have another question here. I've heard that arrivals to the north runway are lower over some communities than the approaches to the south runway. Why is that, and will this project help?
Michael, I will take care of that one. So even with the future Metroplex procedure, the same situation will continue to happen. Aircraft on the north downwind will continue to descend to 1,500 feet or 2,000 feet, depending on weather conditions and visibility. And this is to stay underneath the traffic on the final for the south runway. And this is due to separation requirements that air traffic controllers have until aircraft are established in the final approach course. So even with the OPDs and these new procedures, this will not have any effect on the communities that are located in the general location where the airplanes turn base for Fort Lauderdale Airport.
And Michael, Jim here, could I weigh in on that one too?
Sure. Thanks, Luis. Sure, Jim, go ahead.
So airplanes aren't diving and driving to get low out there. I mean, just like Luis explained, there's a separation requirement, but airplanes are trying to intercept the glide slope for the ILS or the instrument landing system because they need to get established on a stable descent. So perhaps one of our airline pilots could weigh in on that requirement and how you fly those procedures. I know we've got Mark Hopkins or Trey Turner here. Maybe they can't hear me. So.
Well, I defer to Trey. I'm not a pilot. I'm an ops manager, so maybe one of the pilots can help with that, Jim. Thanks.
Caesar, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I can help with that if nobody is going to jump in. I guess the question was the the getting the aircraft that are coming in from the east and the northeast to the north runway, how they have to be pushed down in order to maintain the separation air traffic controllers need from the arrivals to the 10 right final. That in itself really has nothing to do with the flying the glide slope in. Once we're establishing the localizer, then of course we're going to intercept the glide slope. The days of dive and drive are over, and I think that's probably some misconceptions are still out there lingering about the days when, if we were clear for a visual approach, we get down to 1,500 feet as far out as Weston and drive it in, drag it in all the way until you're about 5 miles away. Then do the 3-to-1 ratio to get down from there. But those days are long gone. Regardless of what clearance we get from ATC, all 121 operators today are going to do the safe thing, which is the only acceptable safe thing now is we're gonna mirror the profile that we would normally do on a RNAV or an ILS approach. We're going to intercept that glide slope at 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 feet. No matter if we're clear for that instrument approach or for the visual, we're still going to be able to do that glide path. So it's going to keep us higher once we intercept the glide path. However, if we're on the downwind and ATC pushes me down to 1,500 or 2,000, I'm already down there. So I will be at that altitude when I intercept the glide slope. So that's a little bit of a difference there.
Thanks, Caesar. And Jim, thank you.
Michael, just to add to what Caesar said about that, with respect to the dive and drive principle, it's our policy not only to maintain a stabilized approach criteria for the airplane, which doesn't typically fall in line with what you're describing, dive and drive. It's also policy that we use an existing instrument approach procedure to back up our visual approaches to help us do what we need to do to safely guide the airplane onto that stable approach criteria, which will in turn lead us to the standard, or I should say normal, 3-to-1 glide slope to the runway.
All right, thanks for that perspective. Appreciate that. Okay, we have another question here. What is a Part 150 study, and why can't the FAA combine the Part 150 study and the South Central Florida Metroplex? Okay, I can take a shot at that. So Part 150, by the way, refers to Part 150 of the Federal Aviation Regulations. So that's 14 CFR Part 150, and that provides a framework for airport noise compatibility planning. The Part 150 study enables airports to identify the neighboring areas that aircraft noise affects and then develop measures to mitigate the noise. So preparing a Part 150 study is voluntary, but participation in a program like that allows an airport operator to apply for federal grants for noise mitigation projects where that eligibility exists. All right, so really, when you talk about Part 150 and a South Central Florida Metroplex, those are two separate processes. So airport operators typically would conduct a Part 150 to determine current and future noise exposure around the airport and to develop mitigation measures. The Metroplex is an FAA initiative to develop new, safer, more efficient air traffic procedures that'll undergo an environmental review before implementation. So, anybody have anything to add? Lisa, I see you nodding.
I'm just co-signing on what you said. That's
All right.
absolutely correct.
Okay. All right. So I think that covers that, at least as it relates to the Metroplex. So here's a question we received during a few workshops. When are airports going to see more airplanes like before COVID happened? So there may be some feedback on that others want to add as well. The FAA's role is to provide safe and efficient separation of aircraft throughout the national airspace system as we serve the flying public. So on a daily basis, whether it's weather or a pandemic illness or just the demands of the system, we're in regular contact with industry. Speaking specifically to COVID, I would say we're confident the flights will return. I know there have been many reports that have been carried in the news in recent days and in the past week about levels that are increasing. Certainly they're not back to where they were pre-COVID, but we're confident that the flights will return. We also recognize there's a direct correlation between aviation and jobs and the economy in the state of Florida. There are a couple statistics on that if anybody's interested. The Florida Airport Council reports that aviation contributes 1.4 million jobs in the state, and it has a $175 billion annual economic impact. So the FAA, again, we want that system always to be safe. We want it to be efficient, and we want it to meet those demands as the demand returns to Florida. So is there any industry perspective, airport or industry perspective on that answer that I didn't cover?
Michael, this is Lee with JetBlue. I'll be glad to add some perspectives from our side. Our interest and concern is obviously for the health and safety of our customers and our crew members. That's first and foremost. But we're obviously going to try to provide the best level of service to the community, and we did see very low numbers, probably the lowest numbers that have ever been seen in the at least since I've been in the aviation industry, which is more decades than I probably want to admit. But we're starting to, while we did park a number of planes, we're starting to bring some of those back. We're starting to see some demand rise. It's probably going to take quite a while for us to see numbers that we saw before February. But we're going to continue to work with the airport and the FAA, as well as the health organizations, to try to make sure we're doing the best that we can, as I said, again, for our customers and our crew members. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. You know, one other thought that comes to mind is we held a lot of workshops on this project a little over a year ago, but this project goes back a number of years. We focused on an appropriate scope for the project back in 2017, 2018, and work had happened prior to that. So COVID's a 2020 activity, and it's impacted the industry, and I'm not making light of that, but it's not like you take a 5 to 10 year project and necessarily pull it off. So we, as I said in my initial response, we want the aviation system in Florida to be ready and equipped for the future. A number of procedures within the state are decades old, and infrastructure in our country needs to be modernized, much like you see happen on roadways and bridges, et cetera. So this is part of that modernization effort in the air. Lee, thanks for adding in your perspective. We have another question. What is the link to download the PDF showing the Fort Lauderdale East Flow departures, close view, and other PDFs like that? Where can we find those easily? Lisa, can you
help with that?
Great, thanks.
Okay, and if I can get some help with someone to pull up the website, the website that you should use is FloridaMetroplexWorkshops.com. Again, that's FloridaMetroplexWorkshops.com. And once you're there, if you can click on the city that you're most interested in, click on the city name, and at the top of the next that page, in this instance, we'll click on Fort Lauderdale, and at the top of that page, you will be able to see the boards, the presentation boards that we are showing here. It also has audio files with those boards as well. So if you want to hear again about what's happening on a particular board, you can listen to that file as well. And that's the quickest way to find information about the specific East Flow departures. You search for that and it's there. Also on this tool, on this website, you can find the PDF documents of all the PDF information about this east flow, if you want to pull it up in the environmental document, you can simply download the PDF and click on the table of content, and then click on the specific topic you're looking for, and it should take you right there without having to flip through all those thousands of pages. Thanks, Michael.
All right, Lisa, and then environmental is at metroplexenvironmental.com. I think there are also some Google Earth files. I know there's some Google Earth files and pictures in that on that website as well. So if you go to metroplexenvironmental.com, click on the Florida project, and then look at documents, there's a host of information there, some of which Lisa just mentioned. All right, hopefully that's helpful. All right, we have another question here. Why can't you do RNAV off the ground for departures and have PBN procedures all the way to the runway? Why do you need to vector?
Michael, I'll take that question. With these Metroplex procedures, we actually did build all our departures RNAV off the ground. The only time we're going to have to vector is when there's weather in the area or if there's a reason for safety. Now, when it comes to the arrivals, most of the arrivals will be able to descend all the way to the airport, with the exception of those that usually fly into a downwind in which the air traffic controller has to sequence based on how much volume. But there are quite a bit of arrivals that will be descending all the way down to the runway.
Not sure if anybody else has anything to add from the panel. Rick, thank you. Okay, looks like we have another question here. Will pilots enter a set waypoint and go directly to that waypoint and then turn at that exact waypoint? Why do the boards show the routes with the stars sometimes centered and others on the far edge of the purple route? And I guess there's a third part, so I can come back to this if you want. But also, did you say Miami planes heading north will also use the same waypoint? So a few parts of that, Rick or Luis, maybe we'll start with your perspective on that.
I'm not sure I understood the question completely, but I'll give it a shot. So the waypoints in the majority, they're fly-by waypoints, which means they won't fly directly to it. They usually will turn before they get to that waypoint. The one that says Miami planes heading north will also use the same waypoints. So there's a couple of sits that are shared by both Fort Lauderdale and Miami airports. When they're departing from Miami and they're sharing one of the sits from Fort Lauderdale, they will initially depart on the RNAV procedure, and then they can go direct affix or on a heading to join this departure. The ones from Miami, they're going to be 7,000 feet or higher by the time they reach the Fort Lauderdale area. And let me see if I can get any other part of this question. All the waypoints should be loaded into the FMS, and I will let the pilots handle that part of the question, because when they load either a sit or a star, all the waypoints are loaded into the FMS.
Right, any pilot or industry perspective on that? Caesar?
Yeah, sure. I can answer that. Yes, on places that have RNAV off the ground procedures, which are out there in the United States already, I think South Florida is one of the few that we were not doing that still in 2020. We will actually load into the flight management computer of the aircraft not only the procedure, but the runway that we're going to be departing from, and then how it hooks up to that procedure all the way until we get to the top of the climb or cruising altitude. So yes, when you fly off the runway, once the aircraft turns and aligns on the runway, it knows exactly where it's at. And once you begin your takeoff roll and rotate and start it'll actually just navigate, or either it'll give you the flight director to navigate to, or you put it on autopilot and it takes it on. But yes, the answer, it will go right and follow that procedure precisely as it's been published. I hope that answers the question.
Jim, it looks like you were going to add something.
I can, from a design perspective, and I think that was part of the question, is why are some of them centered on the purple marks and then others are, not centered on the flight track? And that's because the aircraft flight management system uses what's called turn anticipation. So those areas where the star is not centered exactly on the route, it's because the flight management system will have to use turn anticipation, and that's going to be dependent upon airspeed, how fast he's going, how much turn there is at a particular waypoint, and it'll anticipate what it needs to, how much turn it needs in order to join the following route. So typically you'll see at those turn points, that's a perfect example of a flyby waypoint, because you can see he's flying by the waypoint. But if it's waypoints on a straight route, they will center punch those stars, or those waypoints, the stars we have on the chart. And it's the way that the work group that designed the procedures tries to design them so that they, in this instance, they as much as possible lined up with the existing noise backbone for the tracks. Certainly below 10,000 feet, that was a primary objective.
All right, Caesar, Jim, thanks. Appreciate everybody's support on that question. All right, so we have another question that came in. Somebody was asking, have any members of your Metroplex team ever gone to Southwest Fort Lauderdale or Southeast Plantation during west winds to experience the firsthand the quote horrible aircraft noise in those areas? All right, so Jim, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but
So interestingly enough, I think we did a workshop in Plantation, but I don't remember any particular noise issues. Luis or Ricky, do any of your guys live out in the community out there? Because the air traffic people who helped design these procedures, they're South Florida residents.
I can tell you that all the members of the team were living in Miami in the Fort Lauderdale area. Rick actually lives in the Weston area, which was one of the communities that's been mentioned here before. So we're very familiar with, the current noise situations in the surrounding areas of the airport.
So yes and no.
right. Okay. Well, we'll continue. Hopefully we're answering those in the way that they're intended or asked, and we're here for any follow-ups. So keep those questions coming. Again, questions can come to us by text at 949-478-0253, or you can use the Q&A function within Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube if you're connected on the live stream. So here's a question. You advertised these workshops in the Sunday, May 10th Sun Sentinel. The ad was 3 columns and virtually hidden in the classified section. Most of the ad consisted of a list of libraries where the public could go see this huge document. But the libraries in Broward County have been closed due to COVID-19. How can people without computers access the document?
So Michael, I'll take that one on to start off with. I'm glad that the person who submitted this saw our ad, because the ad also included some instructions on how they could obtain a copy of the document, if you will. We recognize that the libraries have been closed, and for that specific purpose, we included those instructions. There are also points of contact or on the Metroplex environmental website. You can send us email. You could write us a letter if you were challenged in that way, and we would be happy to help the requester gain access to it. I understand that those libraries have started opening again. I'm not sure what the status in Broward County is, but in other counties, for instance, in the Miami area, we know that those libraries are open. A couple of weeks back, 64 of the 117 libraries had opened up, and most of those provide computer access. So you can go and view those in an open library. If there's a problem with that, then please contact us, and using the contact information we've provided. I think there's contact information on the website, and certainly on metroplexenvironmental.com, and we will help that person view the document.
Jim, thanks. One other point that comes to mind on that is the environmental assessment was released on May 11th, the day after that notice of availability, or, it was right back there in early May. But we did extend the comment period 60 days. So that's open until July 10th. So I'm only pointing that out because even if libraries were closed on May 11th and some may be open, I don't know if there's any feedback direct from Broward. We can check on that as well. But appreciate you sharing and pointing in contact. Anything else on that? I think you covered it, Jim. I guess one other thought that comes to mind is the workshops are accessible. We set up telephone access texting, for example, but that's not the same as seeing the document. So we'll be available through the contact. I'm going to move on to another question. The way departures are currently constructed out of the Miami airport, there are 2 fixes for Miami. Winco west-northwest and Helde north-northeast, and 2 for Fort Lauderdale. Again, I hope I'm saying these right. Thunder to the west-northwest and arcs to the north and northeast that tend to create 2 en route streams that merge further up instead of in the Miami Tracon airspace. Why was the change made to merge the streams earlier? And we may want to pull up one of the last charts that shows kind of that network. But Jim, I see you off mute, or Rick, either one, from a program or air traffic perspective.
I can try to take this one. So this provides for 4 routes for each of the airports, 4 for Fort Lauderdale and 4 for Miami. So this should be more efficient. Also, this was in collaboration with another air traffic control facility called Miami Center, in which they work higher altitude sectors. I believe the way they had to merge the traffic out in their airspace made it complex. This was something that we were able to accommodate. So hopefully this also results in a safer operation.
Michael, I also want to add that technically the merge is really occurring on the ground in the airport, because now you will be assigned either the bungo, twister, vacay, or arch sit based on what route you have filed. Miami Center could be more clear on this, but depending on what route you have further on, that's the sit that you will get. So there's going to be any merger in the air. It's basically going to happen on the ground at the airport, which makes it a lot more efficient for Miami Center.
Right, and Michael, that was one of those intentional features. Coincidentally, I was looking at that very aspect of it earlier today, that you're able to join that in-route structure more efficiently. So it adds to the efficiency of the operation, not just in the immediate Florida area, but joining the rest of the national airspace system too.
All right, hopefully that explains why that exists the way it does in the proposed procedures. So I mentioned the phone number. I'm just going to give it one more time, or give it one more time right now, 949-478-0253. If you can text us at that, text a question, or you can use the Zoom Q&A button. We'll continue to take new questions until 4:30. We'll continue to answer the ones we've received, and I'm going to just keep us moving through as quickly as I can. So what is an optimized profile to send? I know we said OPD earlier. Jim, can you give a quick overview of that?
Certainly, Michael, I'd be happy to tackle that one. So when we say we optimize the profile, we recognize that we have other constraints in airspace that we have to work with. So an arrival is competing with departure for airspace. They're crossing paths from other routes. So we take those constraints and then we try to build a descent profile using crossing restrictions and speed restrictions that'll allow us to optimize that profile, ideally to use reduced power settings. There can be some fuel burn and emission benefits out of that, and also, some noise benefits. But, really, I think we need to hear from a pilot about that. And see, could be, is Edwin Solly from Southwest, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I can attempt to. So with the OPDs, it allows us to basically transition out the en route environment at a idle speed until we get into the terminal environment. So like you said, it does allow for better fuel burns, less noise, less emissions. So we prefer to do it that way.
Okay. All right. Thank you both. Okay, we have a question here. Why aren't you considering Cs for north runway departures instead of dreads? I'm thinking we may want the west flow close view on that, but
Yeah.
Rick?
Yeah, not a problem. So Cs will actually be used by the north runway. However, it's going to be used for the procedures that go to the northwest. Now, we built these procedures based on existing tracks, which allows for basically two headings. Today, we go on a 290 heading for those departures that go to the north and northeast, and 275 heading for all the other departures. Based on feedback from the public from the last workshop, there was a concern about where dreads was at. We considered that. We moved dreads a little bit farther south. And also the aircraft, when the aircraft departs, they'll fly westbound for about a mile to a mile and a half until turning towards dreads. So this should ensure that the aircraft will remain south of 595 and avoid the denser populated residential areas. But again, this would affect the throughput as well for Fort Lauderdale Airport if all the aircraft had to depart on one stream. Also, if that was the case, that they had to go out to Cs and then farther west, these departures would probably have to be restricted to a lower altitude for a longer period of time. Yeah, Louis, if you want to add anything.
I think you covered it very well, Ricky. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. So we have one here. It seems like we touched a little bit on this, but maybe it's a little different. Let me read through it. Miami and Fort Lauderdale both currently have RNAV off the ground procedures now, and yet they choose to vector. Will these new procedures encourage controllers to actually utilize the RNAV procedures unlike they do now?
Michael, I will take this one. So first of all, the RNAV procedures that we currently have at Fort Lauderdale were designed, I will say, more than 10 years ago. Criteria and rules that apply for these procedures have significantly changed since. So under the new design for this Metroplex project, we're going to use ELSO, which reduces the diversion headings on departures, which is going to increase the efficiency of the airport. So I guess the short answer is yes, the controller, it's our vision that they will be using these procedures RNAV off the ground. We intend to have them on these procedures the whole way out and reduce the amount of vectoring. However, if there's weather conditions or safety conditions, the controller will always have the discretion to vector them off the procedure.
I'll also add, Michael, that our current RNAV off the ground procedures, the way they're designed, isn't really the way we run traffic. So with these new Metroplex procedures, it's going to be closer to how we run traffic today. So the air traffic controller will most likely keep the aircraft on the procedure because that's exactly how we run the traffic today.
And Michael, if I could ask a follow-up question for Ricky or Luis. So on those boards, you've got that dispersed path area. Is that supposed to account for what you're talking about with where you might have to take an airplane off and vector in some circumstances or weather, those kinds of things?
Correct. That dispersed area is where we predict that the controller might have to vector the airplane in reference to weather, other traffic that might be a safety issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Okay, then. Yeah, thank you, Rick, for that. So I know Fort Lauderdale has noise abatement procedures. Are you going to change those? I need to find Lisa. Can you address that
Michael?
one?
Sure, I can try to address that. The quick answer is no, we're not changing those. The Metroplex routes have been designed to comply with the current noise abatement procedures in Fort Lauderdale. So the answer to that question is no.
All right, Lisa, thanks. All right, so I'm going to remind folks, I know I said it just a moment ago, but we're seeing a lot of folks on Zoom, social media. Please keep your questions coming to us. Text us at 949-478-0253, or you can use the Zoom Q&A button. So we have continue to take those new questions till 4:30 and continue to answer what we have there. So let me look through and see if we have any more questions coming in. I'm actually not seeing any at the moment. That doesn't normally happen. So I'm trying to think if we have something something we can cover. Okay, we have a follow-up question here. If the planes are going over industrial areas to the east and west before heading to the waypoint, why are the DNL noise levels increasing? I don't know if we want to pull up boards on that, but we can show the noise tool how that's used. We could pull up an address west and kind of look at that as well as back at the boards.
Sure. I'll be happy to walk through the noise tool while we pull that up. You know, you can see exactly what's happening at your address if you take a look at the noise tool back on that website that you came in at floridametroplexworkshops.com. Once you're at that website, you can go to the noise tool and click there. And then if you scroll down to the actual map, there is a search box and you can start typing an address. And I don't know, would anybody know an address in that area? I'm not sure. Did they say what area? Let's see if we can find, there we go. Once you start typing addresses, you can find some similar addresses in that area that can pop up. And it'll bring you right to that address. And there, the little circles around the closest one to those areas, you can click on that and look at the change in DNL in that pop-up box. It shows the forecasted years 2021 and 2026 for the proposed action and the no action alternative. And the proposed action is just the procedures that we are talking about today, the new procedures that we are proposing. The no action alternative is simply if we do nothing at the end of this procedure, if we do not implement anything, that's the no action. And then you can see the change in DNL between those right there in that box. And I'm not sure I'm answering the direct question, but that's where you can find that DNL information about the area you're concerned about. Thanks, Michael.
So part of that, thank you, Lisa. That's helpful to see that. I think part of the question is if planes are going over industrial areas, why are the DNL noise levels increasing? So I'm not sure exactly where they're making that comment. I mean, every plane's not going over industrial areas. I think what the comment is, the procedures keep them more over the industrial areas east and west of the airport. And we use those new procedures to model that noise, and that's what Lisa's walked us through. I'm not sure if anybody else has a different read on that question than I do.
That's right. And you might see very small increases and decreases in DNL across the entire study area. But ultimately, our analysis showed that there's no significant noise increase for the proposed procedure. Thanks.
And Michael, one of the other things that we've discussed, maybe we're just not making it clear enough, is we really tried to minimize the amount of change below 10,000 feet. And that's because we know we start to cause a greater noise impact. So if we were wholesale moving tracks around the area, that noise analysis would show us that there were some significant changes in what we were doing. If I created a new path with all the airplanes on it, that would show me a significant impact in some areas, and that could be a challenge. And that's one of the objectives of the project, is that we will make sure that we don't create those significant or reportable impacts. Occasionally we do. Typically, if we found we had an impact, a significant impact, we would likely go back to the designing room and figure out why did we do that, and then try to work something procedurally to change that so we would mitigate the any significant impacts.
All right, thanks, Jim. Okay, here's a question. I'm seeing the FAA, airports, and airlines. How are the needs of the community addressed in this project? So I mentioned earlier how we work with industry. The FAA takes noise complaints. The airport has a history of awareness of the community and where there's noise sensitivity. So we try to understand those, from those conversations. But beyond that, I mentioned the 17 workshops we had on this project last year, including 4 in Fort Lauderdale and 3 workshops this year. So part of it is us explaining, us demonstrating what's proposed, us taking comments and feedback, and it's a give and take to listen to the communities, and that's part of the exchange that occurs in workshops like we had in 2019 and in 2020.
Right, and part of that is that there are typically no airport noise advisory boards that give us their take on what we should be doing and where we should be putting airplanes. So we speak with a whole range of people. It's not just it's not just the airports. The airports, believe me, are being advocates for the local community, and that's certainly the case, here in Fort Lauderdale. I remember working with Winston here, and he was his staff. I know he's moved on now to a different position, but they have been strong advocates, and we met with the noise advisory boards to get their input, and also then with the community when we did the workshops. We've taken a lot of input. It's the airlines there are experts in operating those aircraft and those flight management systems. We could not design a good procedure without their assisting us because of their expertise in aircraft operations and flight management systems. So we cut a pretty broad swath of collaboration in these projects.
So Jim, it seems like a good point. I don't know that I've mentioned it other than in the intro, but the chat, the conversations that we have in the workshop are not part of the official legal record for the environmental. So if you have a comment for the FAA, please go to Florida Metroplexworkshops.com, Florida Metroplexworkshops.com, and you'll find a comments tab there, and that will allow you to fill out a comment and send it to us right off that website, or it'll give you a link if you want to email us, or even if you want to drop something in the mail, send us comments through the mail. but please do that. The comment period's open until July 10th. But the discussion today is meant to be an exchange. It's not part of that official record. All right, so I'm going to move on to another question. It is my understanding that the waypoints are flyby and not flyover. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. Why didn't the FAA implement flyover?
Well, I'm going to leap on that one again, Michael.
Okay.
You know, it's and then I'm sure that I can get some input from you know, some of our airline reps too. Flyover waypoint is more demanding for the airplane to fly that too. So when you're looking at variations of speed, if you needed to turn at a particular waypoint and you tried to make that a flyover waypoint, that airplane would fly over that waypoint and then make a big looping turn to get back and trying to join the path. So you would have all kinds of inconsistent path compliance with that type of a design. So, you know, I'm sure, I don't know, Caesar, did you want to weigh in on that one? Flying a flyover versus a flyby?
Okay, there I am. Yeah, I think you explained it very well. If you make them fly over, you're going to have the aircraft is going to fly over that waypoint and then overshoot, and then you'll have to come make a like you said, a loop turn back to join the actual flight path. If the desired flight path is what you have, what it's on the procedure, flyby and letting the aircraft take the calculations of speed and atmospheric conditions and the wind, the aircraft will begin a turn. It'll predict when to start that turn to fly as close over that waypoint as possible. There is really no need to, unless there are some times that you need to have a flyover, but in this type of procedures, I mean, I didn't design them. I'm not the ATC guys, but I can understand that when they're trying to do a flyby waypoint, it would be more than enough. I mean, maybe Trey, at least somebody can jump in there, but the aircraft have the capability of figuring out when to begin the turn in order to stay on that flight path. I guess that's the best way I could say it.
Right. Now on downwind terminations, you know, we will terminate in a flyover waypoint at the final point on arrival procedure.
Right.
So, but not for general use. Everything else in the flight path is likely to be a flyby waypoint.
Right. Flyover have they have their function, but in this case, I think a flyby is probably the appropriate thing to do.
Okay, thanks. So we have a question here. If all the SIDS and most of the stars are RNAV to the ground, as stated by the controller, what degree of deviation is allowed regardless of wind or magnetic deviation from the RNAV quote? It's here as a quote rail center line. Is it 1 degree? Is it 2 degrees? How does that work? So Jim, I know you're probably wanting to jump on that. There may be some industry perspective as well.
Well, I think the difference here is that he's saying they've been saying RNAV off the ground, not to the ground. So that's a big difference here. We're talking about departures, RNAV off the ground. I don't believe we have been saying RNAV to the ground. That would be maybe an RMP approach or something other than that.
Right, and the airplane is, for these types of procedures, we have what's called a navigation specification for the airplane. These are RNAV1, Area Navigation 1 procedures, which requires the airplane to be within a mile of the flight track. Realistically, on a straight path, these airplanes are much closer than that. So you'll see them within, within a half a mile or so. And it all depends upon if you're turning or you're flying a straight path. If you're flying a straight path, they'll be right on there with some dispersion that's, caused by the variance in, different aircraft types, speeds, where they're turning, a variety of factors. So on a rail is not a term that I would generally use. Departures are a little bit different, RNAV off the ground, because the aircraft has to get airborne cleaned up. It has to establish that navigation solution there. Until it does that, although it's a precise path, it's not on a rail. So there will be some minimal wind impact initially on departure. So there's some dispersion on that. Arrivals is a little bit different. And if we are able to connect to an instrument approach procedure, if we connect to an RNP, a required navigation performance approach procedure, from an optimized profile descent arrival procedure, then you would see a very tight, very precise path. But when we terminate in a flyover waypoint on a downwind, because air traffic needs to sequence with a lot of airplanes landing on adjacent runways, then you're going to get a lot of variance in that path until they are established on the localizer.
So Jim, I think it would be worth taking just a few seconds to pull up the East Flow close view. I think it was Caesar's.
Guys might go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it was Caesar's point. So the East Flow close view on arrivals. My apology, on the arrival side. And my point here, I think it's some of what Caesar was sharing, is you'll see that the arrival procedures terminate north of the airport, and there's a distribution of tracks when we pull that up. So you'll see basically the wane arm. Maybe I should ask air traffic to explain that, but if you could cover the fact that procedure goes to a point and then aircraft will turn based on volume, et cetera. I'm not trying to put those words in your mouth, but Rick or Luis?
Michael, that's correct. Based on volume, that's when the air traffic controller will turn that aircraft south to go on a base turn and then line them up for the runway. As Caesar pointed out earlier, we don't really use the term RNAV to the ground. It's more of the optimized profile descent, that allows for that continuous ascent all the way to the runway. And that is done with an RNP procedure. At Fort Lauderdale, we do have an RMP procedure. Depending on volume, that's when we use that procedure, and that should continue in the future.
All right. And Rick, again, but we also expect a distribution of tracks to occur. So not everybody's going to be on an RMP approach. So we'll see more of a distribution on the chart, as it's shown in the graphic here, I think.
That's correct. You're
right.
going to see very similar sort of base turn track data in the future as you see it today. That's based on our separation requirements. So unless that changes, you're going to continue to see that sort of track data.
Okay. All right. Hopefully we clarified that. So there's another question that's come in. I hear the word procedure used. What is a procedure? We've talked about that a good bit.
I can take that one. So essentially a procedure is just a precise and predictable path that aircraft fly on. We're moving from ground based to satellite based, and that gives us the ability really to match up with the technology that exists now with newer aircraft. So in the future, air traffic controllers are going to place these aircraft on procedures, and both the pilot and the controller are going to know exactly what that airplane's going to do.
All right, Rick, thanks.
Hey, Michael,
quick explanation.
Aviation.
Winston, yes, sir.
Yeah, can I use this opportunity to make a point of clarification? Jim made a comment a few questions back regarding the airport's involvement regarding the development of the procedures. I just wanted to make it clear that as the aviation department and as a stakeholder, just like everyone else, we were afforded the opportunity to provide comments, which was submitted to the FAA, and the FAA incorporated those comments. We're not the one that finalized the procedures. That's up to the FAA, which is done based on design and safety. So ultimately, we as the aviation department wanted, to reduce noise as best as possible for the residents in Broward County and to reduce the dispersion. Now it's up to the FAA to determine how to get that done. So we as the aviation department weren't like, the final say in these procedures. That's up to the FAA to do. So I just wanted to make that a point of clarification.
Oh, and I'll echo that, Winston. I think I said that earlier, that this is an FAA project. We do take input from the stakeholders and appreciate the airport's role in that, as well as our work with industry. But it's a federal action, which is why we do an environmental analysis that's compliant with the National Environmental Policy Act and things along those lines. So thanks for clarifying, Winston. Okay, we have a question. Can you help me understand how elbow will be an improvement? In reviewing flight tracks, it looks like aircraft are turning to the north before they get to the water. Can you explain what you're proposing in more detail? So looks like we have a diagram coming up.
Hey, Michael. So it's an improvement because this provides a predictable path for the air traffic controller and the pilot. For the most part, we tried to stay within the backbone of existing tracks. So where elbow is and where that turn should occur is pretty much in the middle of our existing tracks, which is the way that we work traffic today. Also, now that we have a predictable path, we should be able to realize whether we're able to climb that departure to a higher altitude. Today, we usually climb to 5 if there's conflicting arrival traffic. But now with having these predictable paths, we're able to see whether we're going to be able to climb that airplane to a higher altitude or not.
Michael, I also want to add that that fixed elbow was designed keeping in mind that the initial track of the departure will stay over industrial areas instead of residential areas. And that was done in collaboration with Broward County Aviation Department officials.
All right. So hopefully people can see. In case we didn't fully explain that to everybody's understanding, the tracks that are shown here are historic tracks. The dark purple are the proposed procedures. So when you see historic tracks, it looks to me like they're almost coming at more of an angle, right where the mouse is there. And the darker purple that's proposed underneath that is a little bit further south. So as Luis said, that keeps those departure tracks a little bit more on runway heading over industrial areas before they make that turn. So I want to make sure I said that in a way you agree with.
And
okay,
Michael,
Jim, yes,
I think a key point that this question submitter might want to notice is that some of that traffic is concerned about making that immediate turn. Well, that's going out to the northeast, and that traffic would, and I know the ATC guys will correct me if I'm wrong here, but that traffic will be routed straight out, on the Snapper and the Reggae and the Felix departures. So there's going to be some traffic pulled off of that particular route and routed straight out. And that I would hope would be an improvement for them. Is that right from Ricky or Luis?
That is correct, Jim. Traffic that is going to the northeast of the United States or going over the Atlantic Ocean will now be directly east all the way to Marley or Calypso, depending on the runway that they're departing from.
Luis, Jim, thanks for that. Okay, we have a question here. Yesterday, I guess in the workshop yesterday, you stated that 99% of jets would be able to fly the procedures. I find this doubtful since the last aircraft study showed almost 4% of traffic in Miami Center's airspace could not comply. It's my understanding that the vast majority of VLJ and older commuter jets will not be able to perform to the standards necessary. Was this studied or even proposed in the EA? All right, that may be something a few of you want to chime in on. there may be some industry perspective, or Jim, I'm not sure if that was a comment yesterday or not.
I did make that comment, and that is true. From looking at the Part 121 carriers, those airplanes are about 99% equipped. There's a variety of aircraft operators flying in the airspace, including general aviation and other types of aircraft, other aircraft that are certified under different parts of the regulations. So I would never say that there were 100% of them equipped. And from the commercial large aircraft operation that impacts this airport for the most part, about 99%. And I Caesar, did you comment on that before?
No, I think you're right. As far as the 121 carriers that fly out of Lauderdale, JetBlue, Southwest Spirit, all of us are able to fly these procedures. Now he makes whoever is asking the question, making mentions of very light jets, and I have no idea, what kind of capacity they have or what kind of equipment they have.
So I think one of the other points, Jim, that we made yesterday was that older aircraft that can't fly the satellite procedures, we have modified through this project as well some conventional procedures. We've amended some conventional procedures that they would be able to follow. And so that's studied as part of the project. And I don't know if Lisa or Jim, if you want to comment further on that, but it's not all satellite procedures.
And I'll say that's correct based on the prior comments. And, some of those airplanes, and I think Caesar was about to go there, some of them are equipped better than the commercial airplanes. So, when you get into those high-end GA airplanes, my brother is an aircraft mechanic, and he works for a fixed base operator. And so the cockpits on some of those general aviation airplanes are pretty trick. They've got, really advanced, Garmin navigation suites. I'm not advocating for that particular navigation suite, but very advanced. And older airplanes, certainly you're not going to see that in those airplanes. So most of the airplanes, a high percentage of airplanes are going to be able to fly these procedures.
Okay.
Mike, this is Mark Hopkins from Delta to further support that assertion. Some of the older aircraft that are being retired now as a result of the downturn in demand, like the MD-88s and MD-90s, which many of them didn't have GPS capability. Those planes are now gone. I know that we flew a lot of those into and out of Fort Lauderdale, and they've all been retired. So that may even bring the percentage higher. Although 99% for Part 121 aircraft, I think you're right. I don't have the numbers in front of me at the moment, but that certainly is very close, if not right on. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mark. And then Lisa, I know a point you've made in some of the previous workshops or we've discussed is that if an aircraft's not flying these procedures, the new procedures, then they're, for example, VFR traffic, then they're going to be flying, they'll fly in the future the way that they fly today. So there's no difference. That doesn't result in a noise difference from the project.
That's correct, Michael. That's correct. Okay. Good point. Yes, thank you.
All right, let me keep us moving here. How are you finding the online workshops are going so far? Do you think you see benefits or challenges in engaging with the community? I think it's great, but wanted to get your thoughts. Thanks for asking, Mom. No, I'm just kidding. I shouldn't joke. So that's a very friendly question. I think that these workshops are taking advantage of some great technology. I wish that we were able to be right there in person like we were in the workshops last year, but I do feel like we're able to engage and see where there are questions and where maybe there's some energy around the proposal, where there may be some confusion, and hopefully our answers, we're able to have all the experts here. I don't know if everybody can see that, but there are, I think, about 35 people kind of in the area here. So we have all of our air traffic and industry subject matter experts, headquarters, the service center. We have all the people engaged. And I'm honestly hoping that there's some benefits of this in terms of people not having to maybe commute or travel to a workshop. people that maybe haven't been able to participate in the past. So I feel like the exchange is similar to what I've experienced before when I've been live. It's just some newer technology that I hope is enabling us to reach more people. I don't have all the numbers, but we've had some just astronomical views on social media for the workshops this week. And so that's encouraging to me. So quick overview. That's Michael's perspective since I was asked. All right. You made a reference that you were implementing ELSO at Fort Lauderdale. Can you please explain what that means and explain how it is being implemented at Fort Lauderdale?
So Michael,
Maybe
also
I
what
could
it
tag team
basically,
that.
oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, Luis, I was going to say we needed to have air traffic.
Right.
So get on
Okay.
it.
So
Luis, go ahead.
basically what ELSO is, it's reduced divergent PBM departure separation. Currently, we have a requirement of 15 degrees or more divergence for departure, simultaneous departures. With ELSO, we can go down to 10 degrees with procedures far enough off the ground. What this allowed us to do at Fort Lauderdale is to have two separate predictable paths for departures, and we could keep it over industrial areas, both on the east and on the west side. On the west flow, we were able to stay south of 595, a lot further west than we currently do. And on the east side, the same concept, we're staying over the industrial areas until over the water.
And Michael, that does give us an efficiency improvement on, feeding those two paths that, they can anticipate where the turn is. And it should be enable us to be a little bit more efficient.
Okay, Luis, Jim, thank you. All right, we have a question here. I'm going to encourage us to not say everything that we know about it, because I think everybody could answer on it. But it's, can you explain the communication between pilots and controllers? And maybe when we reference in the benefits, these are my words, but I know that we've referenced in the benefits how that can be reduced with this proposal. So either air traffic and or pilot participants, any perspectives on that? Anybody who's flying in other locations that have implemented Metroplex, for example, and or Luis, Rick, from your perspective, what you anticipate here?
I can tell in the air traffic perspective, the expectation is there's going to be reduction in the amount of transmissions or instructions that we have to issue to the pilot, which two positive results from this will be less opportunity for read back, hear back errors. Just to keep you familiar with that is if we issue an instruction to a pilot and they read the wrong information back and we miss it, that could create a safety issue later on. With these procedures, that should be reduced significantly. It would also allow us less frequency congestion, which will let us do other things like focus on traffic calls and provide other services to general aviation or other type of services that we can provide. And it also is definitely a safety improvement because with the predictable path, we know exactly where the airplanes is going to be and we can anticipate either climb or descents a little better.
Thanks, Luis. Any other airline pilot perspective? Trey?
Yeah, I just add just a little bit to what Luis was saying. When you get into densely populated or air traffic areas with lots of radio transmissions, something that we run into quite often as pilots and controllers is people stepping on one another trying to get a transmission in. And when you are able to get these procedures that reduce the amount of communications, it reduces the amount of stepping on one another that occurs, which impacts aviation safety. So definitely a positive.
All right. I think that covers it. In fact, that brings us at 4:39. That brings us to the end of the workshop. So I want to thank everybody for participating, for asking us good questions. I hope our answers were informative, and I want to thank the specialists for providing your expertise, our entire FAA communications team, everybody who helped us with this workshop with support in the background. And I want to acknowledge everybody from the industry who joined us this afternoon to contribute your perspectives to the discussion. So thank you. As a reminder, I know I said this, but as a reminder, the questions today that you asked are not part of the legal record for the draft environmental assessment. So if you have a comment you want to submit to the FAA, please go to the comments tab on this website, floridametroplexworkshops.com, floridametroplexworkshops.com. You can also email us or send us a written comment, and those addresses are also on the comments tab on that same website. A reminder that the comment period is open until July 10th of 2020, and after the comment period closes, the FAA will consider and review all the substantive comments received during the comment period. The FAA expects to issue an environmental determination in September of 2020. This afternoon's workshop has been recorded. It'll be available for playback on the website tomorrow. In fact, you can already find yesterday's workshop there already. We'll be hosting another live workshop for Fort Lauderdale tomorrow, Thursday, June 11th at 6 p.m. So that concludes our workshop for today, and thank you again for joining us.